Hello grade 11s, this is lesson 5 of week 27. We're looking at destruction of wetlands today. A wetland is an ecosystem where water is the primary abiotic factor. So water is the most important abiotic factor in the ecosystem. Wetlands occur where the water table is near or at the surface of the land, so instead of the water table being below the surface, we find that in a wetland the water table is either just below the surface or just above the surface of the land. At present, wetlands are among the world's most threatened ecosystems. And they are not threatened for any reason other than human activity is causing their destruction. We need to understand that very unique types of soils and distinctive plants occur in wetlands. Let's have a look at some of the values associated with wetlands. Why are wetlands important? Wetlands support high concentrations of biodiversity. So they are areas where there are high levels of biodiversity, and we know that this means that wetlands are very important in maintaining biodiversity in an area. Wetlands can supply food. For example, rice paddies. Rice can be grown in wetlands, and fish can be harvested from wetlands too. Wetlands slow down the flow rate of a river. The rapid flow of water in a river is slowed and the water volume is spread out across a shallow basin. We find that the water entering a wetland is flowing rapidly. It enters the wetland and it is spread out over a wide shallow area where it is also slowed down. When the water leaves the wetland, we find that it is slower in its rate of flow. This reduces water erosion. We know that fast-flowing water erodes the land and carries away topsoil. Slower flowing water, erosion is reduced. Now, not only does the rate of flow slow down in a wetland, as the water passes through the wetland and through the root systems of the various reeds, the water is purified. Chemicals such as we may find in pesticides and heavy metals such as lead become trapped in the wetland. The water that leaves the wetland is much cleaner than the water that entered the wetland. Wetlands also provide various domestic uses. The reeds can be used, for example, to make baskets and mats. Very often local communities use the plant resources for thatching. Wetlands very often have special religious and traditional significance in some local cultures, so they are of cultural significance too. Because of the enormous biodiversity associated with wetlands, the area provides a great opportunity for education and for ecotourism. And with careful planning, these areas can be used to attract paying resources who will be able to contribute to the development and protection of the area. Now, all of that sounds extremely positive. We want to see wetlands conserved, preserved, and developed. But we find that in parts of South Africa, shown in yellow on this map, we have 50% reduction in wetland area. So in all of this area, more than 50% of the wetland has been reduced. In the area marked in the green, we find that between 20 to 25% of wetlands have been reduced or lost. It is really only in the area along our eastern coast in KwaZulu-Natal that we find that there is less than 20% reduction or loss of wetlands. What are the reasons for reduction and loss of wetlands? One of the main reasons is overgrazing. Farmers allow their animals to graze in the wetland, which leaves the soils exposed to erosion. Similarly, over-harvesting. We mentioned earlier that wetlands provide resources for making of baskets, thatching, and mat making. Well, if the reeds are over-harvested and they're not given an opportunity to regrow and they're not harvested in a sustainable way, the soils are going to be left exposed, particularly if the reeds are pulled out by their roots. Another important reason for the reduction of a wetland is draining by farmers. The farmers have a wetland on their property and they find that the wetland is useless, so they drain it to provide soil to plant crops. The draining of wetlands and using of that land for commercial or housing development destroys the wetland. So using the area for development, putting houses onto the area that was a wetland, not only destroys the wetland, but it's now actually considered a risky and expensive option for building, because very often the water will accumulate where in the natural catchment that was the wetland, and foundations of buildings can subside, causing unstable constructions.